Welcome to the Rebellion Part 2. Okay, so all of you people tuning in, you're here because it's a year, amazing but true, but it's a year since the Spring Rebellion or the April Rebellion started. This is the one where we had a legendary pink boat in Oxford Circus, where we shut down Marble Arch. We had the love, the heart of the movement in Piccadilly, Parliament Square, and what's the square outside Big Ben called again, ladies and gentlemen? What's that called? Parliament Square. There you go. Oh yeah, I was thinking Trafalgar Square. Basically, we managed to, in a very short period of time, create a huge global story, and that was just London, also Edinburgh. In fact, right across the UK, right across Europe, right across the world. There were actually 33 countries taking action on this day a year ago. Okay, so it's a real honour to be here and having this panel with a really brilliant choice of people to be on the panel. I'm knocked out and a bit starstruck. We've got an hour and a half, which I know will go super fast. But you beautiful people out there who are watching on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, you know, all the modern things. We have a fantastic team of little gremlins who are watching, scrutinizing you now. And if you want to ask questions, please put them up, right? Put them up on your Twitter and your Instagram, your Facebook, and our little gremlins will be harvesting them, and they'll be kind of sending them our way. And over the course of the hour and a half, we'll try and drag some of your questions in and add them into this brilliant panel. So I'm just going to introduce you to the panel first, and honestly, it is a real honor. So we have George Monbiot, okay, is a national treasure. Okay, so as well as writing a Guardian column and speaking at many events, including Extinction Rebellion's Declaration Day, he's a well-known speaker and the author of many books on politics and the environment, including his latest one, which is a blinder called Out of the Wreckage, but also How Did We Get Into This Mess? Feral, Heat, The Age of Consent. George has been doing this for a really long time. He's actually been on the front line in the road protests of the 90s, and he's been a main figure in the movement for a long time, all right? So it's brilliant to have you here, George. For many years before XR, before XR existed, George advocated for a people's movement on climate and biodiversity issues. And for us at Extinction Rebellion, you know, George was the guy who started writing about us straight away and actually came down on the Declaration Day, got arrested, gave a brilliant speech, but he really kind of gave us great support right from the beginning. So, you know, George, you know, thank you, man. Thank you from all of us for the great support from the beginning. Okay, a very close friend of mine who I've been working with since November 2018, where we met on the bridges, Kofi Mawuli Klu. He's the co-founder and current joint coordinator of the Extinction Rebellion Internationalist Solidarity Network, XRISN. He's also the co-vice chair of the Stop the Manganese campaign, that Stop the African Apocalypse campaign, and comes from a background, he's a real veteran, a long background of Pan-African community advocacy for global justice. So we'll get Kofi to talk more about the International Solidarity Network over the course of the next hour and a half. Okay, on from Kofi, we have Zuhura Plummer. Zuhura Plummer, right, was the amazing woman who did the lock-on underneath the truck in Marble Arch and kept the truck there. It's a fantastic bit of film of her with Greta written on her lock-on. And, you know, one of the great, you know, she got arrested twice while she was down there. She also got arrested at the City Airport action. But Zuhura is an illustrator, an Oxford rebel. She's been involved with Extinction Rebellion since October 2018. And she's given a number of Heading for Extinction talks. Okay, and as I mentioned, she's been twice arrested for criminal damage during the October Rebellion, and more recently at the City Airport action. Now, moving on to the amazing Lauren Conway. Lauren Conway, you rebels out there may recognize Lauren. She was part of the XR Durham action about the opening of a huge mine. And she was on BBC. She'd never been on media before. Knocked everyone's blocks off. Absolutely brilliant new spokesperson for Extinction Rebellion. She's a mature student and waitress from Barnsley, living in Hartlepool, and she's a co-host of the Northeast Political podcast called, well, I'm a Southern Jess, right? So I would call that Lass Cast. but I think it's probably
It's Last Cast.
Last Cast. Yeah, exactly.
Last Cast, yeah.
Last Cast. Start Last Cast Saloon. She helped set up XR Northeast, which is really rocking it, and I can see they've got their own podcast coming up soon. And she's a newbie on the national spokes team, but she's a cracking spokesperson. You're going to see her a lot. She's been involved also with Extinction Rebellion since October 2018. Last but not least, Jessica Townsend. Jessica is a fiction writer with a film in production next year. Amazing. She has been an XR activist since the beginning and coordinates the amazing XR podcast. Okay, and she's a co-founder of the Writers Rebel. I thought they were rebel writers.
Right. No, yeah. Writers Rebel.
Writers, but you see, trust the writers to get fancy with their semantics. But also, right, Jessica, and this is really important, right? Jessica was one of the gang who did the first official Extinction Rebellion action, right? Which I don't know. I mean, let's start by talking about this because it's quite extraordinary. What did Extinction Rebellion do? They only occupied Greenpeace headquarters. Okay, no one saw that coming, right?
No. And Simon Bramwell, because he thought I looked so straight, he gave me a big bunch of flowers and sent me forward. So it looked like somebody had had a baby or something. So they opened the door to me, and then all the rebels streamed in behind.
Fantastic. Tell us what was the aim of that action, Jessica?
Well, we wanted them to up their game, but we didn't want to be aggressive because we love Greenpeace. You know, they've been around forever. We love the actions that they're doing, but quite clearly the climate and ecological emergency wasn't being addressed. So I remember Claire Farrell had written this letter which says, "We love you, Greenpeace, but please, you know, join us." And of course, they resisted for quite a while, but now it feels like they are shoulder to shoulder with us. We also took flowers, we hung around, and we gave a version of the talk in the lobby.
Amazing. George, actually, I'd like to bring you in on this as well, because it was a really extraordinary thing. From the point of view of a very experienced climate activist, how did you take it when you saw this crazy new kids on the block occupying Greenpeace? How did you take it, Bob?
Well, I mean, I was just incredibly excited by Extinction Rebellion in general because it's what's been missing. It is the missing element. And I've been 35 years now in this business, and much of that time has been spent just banging my head against the wall. Yeah, and there were some cracks in the wall, none in my head. My head was fine, but but those cracks were never big enough. And the reason they were never big enough is that there wasn't the scale of popular movement that we needed. And we'd been pretty good at picking off particular individual issues, like the roads protests in the 1990s, which were incredibly successful. But when it came to the overarching issue, basically the collapse of our life support systems, there was nothing remotely scaled to the scale of the crisis, the predicament that the world faced. And with the emergence of both Extinction Rebellion and Fridays for Future, we begin to see that movement developing, that movement that's been missing for so long. So I was like tremendously excited by all of it, a bit skeptical about the Greenpeace action. I was like, would this really be the target that I would choose first? But I saw it as just a sort of, a small first step towards a much wider set of actions which XR were going to be doing. And so the moment I heard about it, even the name itself, it just created a frisson of excitement for me. And I thought, yes, that's it. This is what we've been waiting for so long. It's happening.
That's fantastic. Kofi, I'd like to bring you in on this because I remember the 5 Bridges action in November 2018 when you and I did a number of the bridges with a handful of Global South activists. I remember coming off the bridge with you and you turning to me and saying exactly what George just said. You turned to me and you said, "This is what we've been waiting for." So maybe you could add to that thinking. Why is this stuck out for you, Extinction Rebellion?
Well, because as a political refugee from Africa, being campaign actively on Pan-African and global justice issues, including the climate and ecological crisis, there's been all kinds of outbursts, but nothing so massive and determined to disrupt business as usual, on a scale where, there was a clear intention to mobilize people to persist in that disruption until something, dramatically gave way. And as somebody who's been in all kinds of protest actions, mainly from the African heritage communities, from Global South diasporan communities here, trying to link our battles back to the Global South, and so on and so forth, and not getting the kind of massive response. I mean, there have been outbursts here like, Jubilee 2000 some time ago on the debt issue, then Occupy, and so on and so forth. But that persistence of this time, we are out there to mobilize and disrupt business as usual until something drastic gave way, and attention was focused on all of us coming together to resolve this crisis as an emergency issue. That really, 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 woke a lot of us up to the fact that, yes, this time round, we're getting the response from the global north that our peoples in the global south have long been waiting for. And George is correct, that you just couldn't lose sight of the fact that this was something dramatic, historic, answering the yearnings of millions upon millions of people across the world. And it was a very sobering moment where for once you realize that, yes, people here could respond in ways that could make the changes we've all been waiting for now begin to happen and being done by ourselves, not anybody else. And this is the remarkable thing about Extinction Rebellion.
Yeah, brilliant. That's really exciting. And the word emergency, and as George said, just the name Extinction Rebellion and the idea we're talking about emergency immediately just took it to a completely different level. Let's go completely down the other end of the age scale, okay? So Lauren, I was talking to you earlier today, and you've just heard a handful of older activists who've been doing this a long time. Now you're in your mid-20s, 27, and you told me a fantastic story about what it was like for you coming down from the Midlands with mates in a car and setting up. And what drew you to this movement? I mean, obviously you're for a young person who's aware of the climate emergency we're in, it's hugely important to be part of a movement. But why did you get drawn to this movement? What was different about it? And what was exciting about it that day, over those days when you were down here? Because it was great listening to you earlier on.
Yeah, so I think we came down to the bridges first, and I was so excited seeing on Facebook that somebody's actually willing to take risks, because I've been on marches before, and when I was a little bit younger, nobody in my family's really been to these types of marches. It was completely new to me in my teens. And naively, I thought that this many people coming together, we've got 200,000 people, the politicians are going to listen to this. And then you go home and you realize that you do not get listened to and nothing changes. And, all that hope that you felt on the day just seems to have been wasted. And, just seeing over the years, the situation get worse with the climate catastrophe. And, even David Attenborough coming out and saying that, we've got until the end of the century, basically. We need to act with the urgency of the situation. And I think seeing a group that wanted to break the rules and, knowing that hundreds and thousands of people have been wanting to break the rules and stand there with us in solidarity, it just felt so exhilarating, and I felt a great sense of relief.
Amazing word to use, relief, as in, God, there's a chance, it's finally come. And that's, I can really, really identify with that. Zuhura, what I know that you also have been involved in activism in the past, and it hadn't always been a great experience for you. What was it about Extinction Rebellion that made you feel the time has come? What drew you to this, to actually take direct action a number of times, civil disobedience?
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing, because it was a merging of lots of different things at the same time. So I think I was very, so I had a very sort of political activisty childhood, and then had really lost it in my 20s and had become quite numb to the whole thing. It was just too big and too awful to look at, really. And it was it was a combination of so many different things. It was the IPCC report coming out and the WWF report coming out was just like so shocking as to the urgency of it all. But then it was when I went to XR's like training day, there was just so many people, and I was expecting 20 people in a little room, and it was like 120 people. It was just genuinely very impressive. And I loved the design and the visuals and the graphics and the artwork, and I just absolutely adored that. I just thought it was super cool. And I felt like it was from, like, I could get involved. I felt like anyone could get involved. There were so many different types of people there. And previously I'd always sort of seen activists, and like I've known quite a few activists and quite a few family friends and stuff like that. But I'd always worried that I was a bit too mainstream, that I wasn't sort of anti-capitalist enough. I mean, I am, but what I mean by is like how I look, you know. And so I just felt like it wasn't for me, and that I would be kind of like looked down on. And so I never really got involved, and I was always felt a bit like I couldn't. And XR, there was just none of that, and it was just like, yes, get involved, here you are, here, do this, and I was just like, boom, in. And yeah, it was just the sheer numbers of people, I think, was really impressive in those early days.
Yeah, it was. That's great. And also what was amazing was the breadth of age as well. I mean, there's so many. I mean, for all of us, it was extraordinary to see people like Phil Kingston getting arrested, the 82-year-old, you know, just one of the most sort of stormtrooper-like activists I've ever met in my life. And he's 82. He's sitting on top of a train, eating his packed sandwich, going, well, I'm doing it because I love my children. I was just, guys, heartbreaking, beautiful. And there was very many, very elderly people. I've never seen that before. But it was the broad span of people being drawn and the huge numbers. It just seemed quite extraordinary. So let's get a little bit nostalgic for a brief period of time, folks. So I'm going to go to you first, Jessica, so you can start warming up now. But I think it'd be quite nice if we just shared a story with all the viewers out there of, you know, one moment that sums up that amazing spring rebellion for you, you know, maybe from the first day. And I'll start with one myself, right? Because I was working with the media spokes team at that time. So we were gathering stories all the time. And this one is the one that got me, right? So you have, talking of the elderly activists, I like to call them Grey Panthers as it happens, right? So you basically had a load of young people on the amazing Waterloo Bridge, and the police had lined up on both sides, and they were going to come in, and all the young people had linked arms, absolutely ready to get arrested and taken away. And then in comes this sort of, I don't know what the military term is, but a sort of troop of elderly people. And they just came in between the young activists ready to be arrested and the police. And the elderly people, average age like 75, yeah? And they said, take us first. Take us first, because these young people, they have their life ahead of them. But our life is behind us. So take us first, arrest us all first, let us fill your police vans first. And it absolutely broke the sort of resolve of the police that evening, and they all just went away. And I, you know, people found that incredibly moving. It's you know, and it's no huge sacrifice if you're like a, you know, middle class white people, then you know, prison is a very different, very easy sacrifice to make. But having said that, though, thousands of people were getting arrested, and elderly people. It's not nice to get arrested. It's not nice to spend the night in the cells down in Bromley and come out at 4 a.m. But they were all totally prepared to do that. And it was a mixture of those elderly people making that sacrifice, but also the police going, this does not feel right, and we're going, you know, and leaving the scene. I just thought it was quite an amazing story. Loads of things stuck out, you know, massive attack playing on Marble Arch and all that. It was incredible. But what was memorable for you, Jessica, and the rest of you panelists? Get your little stories ready. Jessica, hit me, Daddy-O. What have you got that you remember?
Actually, mine is maybe a tiny bit of a weird one. Parliament Square was being cleared, and there were a lot of rebels from Scotland and the north in Parliament Square. But I also remember Iggy Fox was around there a lot, and Iggy sadly died in February. And we had a memorial for him. But anyway, so they were clearing there, and we were marching towards Marble Arch, where Greta was going to be speaking. And actually, Phil Kingston, who you just mentioned, spoke before her. So we had the old and the young. But it was like a moment kind of lost in time, that I was with the Red Brigade. It was the first time I'd ever seen them, and I found them astonishing. There was a New Orleans band playing a funeral march, and we walked through all the parks, and we walked past the Winged Victory, we walked past Buckingham Palace, we walked past all these London memorials, and it felt like we were doing something extraordinary. And it was a beautiful day. We were backlit. We looked like a flipping film. The flags were almost floating in the air, looking like these stained glass kind of colors. And I felt like I was where I wanted to be. Most of the time when things like that happen, I was in the crowd who were looking in, but I was just part of a big gang of people going from Parliament Square to Marble Arch to hear Greta speak, and it was beautiful.
Well, I was very visual when you were describing that. I was almost there myself. Zuhura, what sticks out for you?
There are so many. I mean, it was the best 2 weeks of my life, and I haven't had a life short of adventure and fun and good stuff. I think one of the most powerful things to me was the singing on Waterloo Bridge. So there was a couple of people who held that space up there, and I'd love to know who they are. But there was one particular woman with a drum, and she would just beat this very slow rhythm, and we would all sing in unity. And everybody on the bridge would be just naturally rocking. And of course, there were the trees, and there were the flags, and there were the banners, and all of the other things. But it just had this, and we were singing beautiful, beautiful songs from all around the world, like lots and lots of different creeds and, you know, and struggles and different things that we were coming together in that one moment on the bridge. And it was just one of the most incredibly beautiful things in terms of your own body being with those people and that feeling inside, and the rhythm of the singing and the repetitiveness of it. It was and the cherry blossom. I mean, it was as if the trees had come out for us to hear us sing. So I think that was one of my, I have very fond memories of Waterloo Bridge.
That's beautiful. Yeah, Waterloo Bridge, there's something very magical that's going down there. For anyone who's listening and watching, you all know exactly what I mean and what Zuhura means. Kofi, what sticks out for you from the April Rebellion? Because I know we did quite a lot of work that time, and there was a day where we took the International Solidarity Network to a couple of the sites to give panels. But overall, for you and the group, what was stuck out for you, my friend?
Well, what stuck out in April particularly was that day at Oxford Circus, when we had mainly Global South activists, including my colleague, Mr. Stanford Osei, Romana Hashem. There was the poet Magero from the Black community here, you know, and actually what struck me that day was the extra aggression of the police, particularly trying to disrupt Global South activists, being very much parts of the rebellion, being visibly seen to be at the forefront, you know, of the rebellion. And, you know, I contrasted that with remember the November bridge occupation, which one thing that stood out there, which really was one of the major attractions to my colleagues that I came along with, you know, as witnesses, was the immense care, Jamie, you know, you and those who received and supported and guided us through the rebellion from one bridge to the other, you know, the immense care in terms of ensuring that we were well looked after, I mean, it's a huge pressure on my colleagues who were not expecting that. So that was also one distinctive feature of Extinction Rebellion, its attention to regenerative culture, looking after activists, encouraging people, you know, to look after themselves during the course of the rebellion. And that also carried through into the April one. So when the police came and were being particularly aggressive towards non-white activists from the Global South who were coming to speak, you know, the protection of everybody else, you know, was particularly striking. But the message that we got very clearly from that was the fear that if more people from our global South communities, diasporan communities, even in London, were coming to participate in these rebellions, and therefore, the very picture of the people massing up began to change. The message that the world will get was so frightening that there was a particular attempt to ensure that people from the global South diasporan communities in London were discouraged from being visibly seen, at the forefront of this April Rebellion. And that was a very, very striking thing, which demonstrated also the real potential within Extinction Rebellion, that as a catalyst of all the movement of protest of all communities, within and beyond, London, that will set a clear message that on this climate and ecological crisis, all communities are coming. It's not about left, right, center, whatever. It's not about little pockets of radicals or, non-radicals. It is about communities coming together to say, this is the one issue on which we will unify, change the world. And that potential really is the most powerful thing we need to develop and go forward with as far as Extinction Rebellion. Extinction Rebellion has barely started. And I think when we come to the discussion around the Global Citizens Assemblies, that is really where the potential, the real power of the movement from below, really lies.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, we will definitely go into that in more detail over the course of the conversation, but it's really encouraging to hear what you're saying. I'm going to move over to you, George, to get your feedback on the April Rebellion. But also, there's so much hope going on in this panel that I'm dissolving into a ball of light, right? So while you talk, George, I'm just going to close my little windows. Go for it, Daddy-O.
Well, I was quite ill this time last year, so I wasn't able to turn up until right towards the end of the rebellion, which was a great regret for me. It was a real shame, but when I did turn up, it was still going strong, and I spoke on top of the truck that Zuhura was locked onto underneath, and in fact we got surrounded by police, didn't we, Zuhura, who had sort of all moved in on us, and then saw that it would just be too much trouble to try to pull us all away and drag the truck away, probably because you and others were locked on underneath. And it just, yet again showed the incredible power of solidarity and civil disobedience.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, anything else that stuck out for you, George? Was that the only day that you were down? I can't quite recall on the April Rebellion. Was that?
Yeah, it was right at the end. I mean, I'm much better now. I'm completely sorted, I think. So, but no, it was very frustrating.
Yeah, but it was great that you were there, man. It was quite incredible seeing you dissolve into a pool of police all around you as soon as you open your mouth. It's exactly what Kofi is saying in a way. I mean, we were in Occupy. You're doing something right if you're surrounded by police just for talking. That's when you're doing something right. Okay, and we literally dissolve into a pool of blue because we're just talking about maybe there could be a better world. It's really quite incredible to watch all this. Lauren, what did you what stuck out for you? Because you told me some great stories earlier today, but what stuck out for you as a really strong, salient memory?
Yeah, so it's the people that I met, really. There was one lady in particular whose name I didn't manage to catch, but she was part of a group of ladies from Sheffield who were knitting bee hats, crocheted bee hats. And it was amazing. And they were teaching us songs, so they taught us some lovely songs about the environment and stuff through the day. We were on an early shift together. And then I managed on the Thursday, it was the first time that I managed to look around the other blockades because we've been all on a shift trying to keep our own safe. And just as I managed to start exploring, we got a text saying that the police are going to try and clear Parliament Square. So we ran back as quickly as possible. And when we came back, we were blocking the four corners. Only one corner remained blocked. So I ran there really, really quickly and sat down. And there were only a few people left and the police had started making arrests. I sat down next to the lady with the bee hat on. And anyway, so we started singing the song that they taught us through the day. And I happened to have like a big dodo costume on with a helmet. And I had a sign. Yeah. My friend had got hot and asked me to wear it. And it said, don't just sit there, do something. So I was sat with this and we were all singing and we were causing quite a spectacle. So members of the public started filming as we went past. And my partner said that he heard the police saying, "Get the duck, woman," like that, because people were filming it. So they came over for me, but the older ladies who'd been crocheting were kind of expecting to be arrested first because of the way that they were sat. But they came straight in for me, and I'm not small. And they picked me up, and I think the police were having quite a bit of difficulty trying to get me out around the older ladies. And he said, "You're going to hurt this old woman." And she's going, "No, you're not. No, you're not. Carry on, carry on." So just the fact that the police were trying to use the fact that the lady was old as a way to kind of make me comply and make me move out of the way. And the fact that she was kind of affronted by it. She sat up straight and she was like, "Carry on." Fantastic. It was really, yeah.
Well, we're out on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. Sheffield lady out there, get in touch. Let us know who you are. I've got a strong feeling, Lauren, that Sheffield lady may be connected to what's called the knitting nanas, who are were the front line of the anti-fracking movement up in Preston. And yeah, they knit in black and yellow, and they're all granny. Yeah, the knitting nanas, they're wonderful, legendary activists. I mean, you can't argue with a lady knitting. I wouldn't anyway. Okay, let's get down to some sort of more laser talk, because this is the happy bit. We're all, hopefully all you viewers out there, you're all remembering your best memories. You know, why don't you kind of get a little camera out tonight and film you going, "Well, I remember when," and put it out on social media for us, okay? Let's celebrate the joy, because there's, I don't know about you, George, but it reminded me of Reclaim the Streets in the 90s. I mean, there was a hell of a lot of joy in Reclaim the Streets, and all of you younger activists, if you look up Reclaim the Streets, they would all meet in one place and then disappear, follow your flag. You know, one flag went down the tube station, came out at Shepherd's Bush, and then they ran over to the roundabout and they blocked the M40, big sound system, planted a tree in the motorway. You know, the other flag went down to Tottenham, and, you know, Reclaim the Streets, joy, music, absolute joy, fantastic. You know, none of the kind of chin stroking kind of vibe. It was actually just joy, and it is joy. You know, for anyone who's watching this, you know, and you're sort of, should I get involved in this kind of civil disobedience? Yeah, you definitely should, because, you know, it's terrifying when you look at the science. We all know that. You know, we could flip into crying right now. Everyone in this panel could, because we're here because we know the science, all right? And we could flip into sobbing now, easily, right? And one of the ways to kind of embrace that reality and stay sane is to take action, non-violent civil disobedience, which is what Extinction Rebellion has really nailed so well. And man, it's joyous. It's absolutely joyous, you know. And that's the thing, you can sort of break the spell. You know, we broke the records for arrest, something like 10 times over. You know, there's only room for 500 police cells to be, you know, there's only room for 500 arrests in London. Okay. So people who arrested were being sent to Bath and Bristol and Brighton. Don't know why it's all BR, but it was. But, you know, there were so many people being arrested all the time, and it's okay. You know, what's her name? Dixon. So she, Cressida Dick. Cressida Dix is the Gold Command police officer who's been in charge of watching demonstrations for like 15 years. And she was, you know, quite shocked. She was saying, "I've never seen anything like this." You know, but it wasn't like, you know, heroic or anything. It was just joyous. And there's a great quote from Belarus Free Theatre, who I work with a great deal. And they said, "Look, you've got to understand something, okay? Us lot taking action, this is what normal people do, okay? Never forget this, right? The extremists are the people who know what's happening and do nothing. We are just being normal, all right? And you know, that whole joyous aspect of it is intoxicating and brilliant and authentic and real." So we're going to go into some more kind of nuanced questions, because, you know, we started well, and then we had the October Rebellion, and here we are. You know, we're a year and a half in, ladies and gentlemen, a year and a half in. Okay, there are we're in 73 countries. There are over 200,000 people who've signed up to take action in this country alone. Okay, we've come from nothing, and it's exploded really quickly. All right, but where does it go now? All right. What are the lessons that have been learnt? And actually, I'm going to start going back with you, Lauren, if that's okay, because you said something really, really interesting, which I'd like you to open up on. You know, it looked great. There was loads of coverage, but, you know, what was the political response? Has there been a real tangible political response? Are you convinced by it? Or really have they just been doing lip service? What's your take on this?
Yeah, so I was really thrilled to see we made the front page every single day during the rebellion, and people have started talking about the climate crisis with an urgency that wasn't there before. So that's a great victory. But when it turns into, you know, tangible, concrete changes that the government have made, they've done next to nothing. They've paid lip service at the right times when people are paying the attention. But unfortunately, like, I can't, you know, congratulate us so much because there's still a hell of a long way to go. And I've even noticed that I feel like with us being, we're not partisan, which is good because it gives us broad appeal. But also I've noticed that politicians have also been using us in a way. So I noticed that Rory Stewart used us in his campaign video. There was like rolling images of the protests and things like that. You know, they don't seem scared. They've not been scared into action. You know, the public definitely didn't vote with the climate crisis in their minds in December, unfortunately. So I'm not convinced. And I joined the movement with, you know, knowledge that there were plans to escalate if the government didn't take the action needed. And they've certainly not. So I would be interested to see where do we go next, because time is certainly running out. Yeah,
that's great. Really, really good point. Really shocking to think about how, on the one hand, we had so much coverage. It seemed like the climate emergency was really here in people's minds. And then a government that is almost built to ignore the climate emergency got voted in so hugely. So it's, George, if I can get you to follow up on this, George, you know, you have been a fantastic commentator, if you don't mind me saying, for a really long time. Have we had any impact on the government? What is the impact of Extinction Rebellion, and has it had its day? Perhaps we just raise the alarm and we go home. What's your take on this, George?
Well, the job's certainly not done yet. There was a UN report last year showing that to stand a good chance of coming in at no more than 1.5 degrees of global heating, beyond which things get really hairy, you need a global cut of about 7.6% per year throughout this decade. And there's no government which is committed to anything like that. And, you know, it's true that we have definitely made it harder for the UK government to backtrack. We've forced them to make rhetorical commitments, which is something. I mean, it's not nothing, because, you know, you can then use those rhetorical commitments as leverage against them. You said you would do this, so why aren't you doing it? We definitely have raised the profile of this great existential issue, though not nearly to the extent that it needs to be raised, because it should be at the forefront of everyone's minds. But we're not seeing action being taken by any governments on the necessary and required scale. And I know we'll get on to the coronavirus crisis soon, but, you know, one thing it has demonstrated is you can do it if you want to do it. You know, the only thing that's missing is political will. You know, we've got the infrastructure, the money's there if you want the money to be there. The capacity to change society and to change what everybody's doing is there if you want it to be there. And so what's missing is that political will to take the climate crisis and the wider ecological crisis as seriously as it needs to be taken. And the only thing which is going to create that political will in a political system which is wedded to the power of money, and that's what we're really up against, is the billionaires, the corporations who want things to stay the same because they have benefited from that status quo. In fact, they have created that status quo. The only thing which can break politics away from their grip is a sustained campaign of non-violent civil disobedience in conjunction, obviously, with all the other political methods, the legitimate political methods. But that is the absolutely key catalyst which makes those other political methods effective. Now, I'm hoping that Extinction Rebellion will continue to be the highly effective catalyst that it has been in the past year and a half so far. But you know, if not XR, it will have to be another movement similar to XR, learning the lessons that we've learned from these past 18 months, but also lessons from the past 50 years or more of environmental action. But the crucial thing is scale. You know, you can say, well, we could do it this way or we could do it that way. The most important thing is that we do it huge, that we involve vast numbers of people with a great deal of commitment on the part of those people. And you can sort of talk about tactics, strategy, till you're blue in the face. That's not the main thing. The main thing is inspiring very, very large numbers of people to take action and to stick with it. That is what changes things.
Brilliant. Thank you, George. I'm just going to pause for a minute. All you viewers out there, we're getting the questions in. My little gremlins are sending in questions. We're going to start answering them shortly, but I'm going to get a few more comments from the other three members of the panel, and then I'm going to go to the questions from the public. Thanks a lot for being so patient. Hey, folks, this is going great, by the way. Thanks so much, everybody. It's brilliant. Jessica, I'll just see you. I can see you nodding in agreement with what George is saying. It's concerning, isn't it? Because, you know, we managed to get a lot of people for April, and then October, it was quite tough. And, you know, now we've got coronavirus and things are spreading out and slowing down. You know, can Extinction Rebellion get those numbers? And if so, how are we going to do that? I mean, there's a brilliant use of language from Lauren earlier on talking about it being non-partisan. The idea that we're drawing, you know, so many different types of people have this broad appeal. Can we keep that up? You know, you've been at the center of it right from the beginning, Jessica. So what's your take on that?
The center. So to sort of talk generally, and I know you're going to kind of move on to this, but I personally have been very heartened by the way that people are foregrounding the NHS, because it feels like we've just come out of Brexit Britain, which felt like the States. It felt like we are never going to heal this political divide. And suddenly, both, you know, everybody across the political persuasion is very much behind the NHS. And it feels like that is a healing way forward. And we need to be part of that middle going forward. When I was young, about the same age as you, I imagine, Jamie, I used to find centrist politics so boring because everybody agreed we didn't really have a radical kind of people with radical agendas. The right seemed like the left. Tony Blair came in, but then during Brexit time, that seemed like a kind of idyll, that we had a country that kind of agreed with itself. Now we have, it's sort of almost like the opposite of shock doctrine in this kind of way, that if the country comes together around the NHS, around key workers, around keeping our people safe, maybe we can take that consensus and say, actually, folks, like George was saying, we've got a much bigger crisis that is looming, and perhaps the way forward is big infrastructures like HS2, but it's not HS2. It is rebuilding a carbon zero economy, a carbon zero country. So for me, Naomi Klein says every time there's a shock like this, there are opportunities. It's always been the capitalists who have jumped in and seized those opportunities. Now let's smarten up and let us do that, whether it's Extinction Rebellion or whether it's other climate activists. Let's seize that.
Yeah, that's a fantastic word, because Naomi Klein's book is terrifying because it's coming true, or it keeps coming true. And you're the first person ever I've spoken to who said, yes, but, you know, the shock doctrine could work. You know, you could do a shock doctrine for good. So instead of the crisis being utilized by neoliberal forces, actually used by, you know, utilized by kind of positive forces to kind of make the change for the better, which is, you know, something really worth fighting for. Kofi, I'd like to bring you in on this. So we're really, at the moment, we're talking about, you know, can it grow, Extinction Rebellion? Because George is saying, you know, it's the numbers, the vast numbers for civil disobedience that's so important. Can it grow? And if so, how do you think it can be growing? And if you don't mind, I'd like you to also weave in the idea of the Internationalist Solidarity Network and what work that's been doing, if you can do that, please.
Well, the beauty of Extinction Rebellion from the very beginning, and I must say that, you know, some of the people who started this that I met, I mean, people like, you know, Gail Bradbrook, you know, Roger Hallam, I mean, you know, who's, for me, I mean, including yourself, the point that was so attractive is these are people who didn't come across as the know-it-alls, who've started something that has all the answers, and they're just out there to execute some doctrine, you know. The beauty of it was calling everybody together to say, yes, this is the crisis of our lives for all generations to come, you know, and let's pool all our knowledges and let's start sharing and learning more in order to find the answers. And I think that that is what made Extinction Rebellion a learning movement from the very beginning, where you come in with what you know, you're respected for what you know, but you also know that you're going to be in there and learn more, and through doing, through making the change happen in a most disruptive kind of way, where you begin to learn to be the power, you know, in people who have been made to feel so powerless and only have to go out to the streets and beg and plead and cry for those up there to make the changes. Extinction Rebellion offered us an opportunity to unify all of our communities into a grand learning movement that unifies all other movements as well, to become the catalyst for change. And I think that this is really the most powerful thing about Extinction Rebellion, that it is a learning movement. So from the things that we've done, we are learning from those things. And we knew, you know, that, for example, we couldn't just be doing, you know, getting people into central London and doing disruptions in central London. You know, that clearly some of us who come from Global South diasporan communities who could not be at the forefront of arrest and so on, right from the very beginning, we're offered the opportunity, and we so seized the opportunity. Also, we're encouraged to say, okay, so how could people participate in this rebellion in other ways other than being at the forefront and doing things to get arrested? And contrary to the misconception around Extinction Rebellion, it was all about, you know, getting people arrested. That was not our experience of Extinction from the very beginning. There were opportunities for others to do rebellion differently from just doing things to get arrested. And this is where the potential lies. And it is that which made those of us who came in and said, okay, you know, there is a huge opening here for the global South resistance that has taken many forms of rebellion, you know, and manifests itself in the lives of global South communities very differently. You know, we rebel through music, we rebel through dance, we rebel even in church, we rebel in mosque, we rebel, you know, on the dance floors, right? You know, in the theaters. So how can we be part of building a movement of movements that empowers our people through diversifying forms of rebellion? And this thinking was something that Extinction Rebellion itself was learning from and actually embracing. And so we haven't, in fact, we haven't seen anything yet. The power of learning from each other, which Extinction Rebellion is encouraging, the power of learning globally, which through the Extinction Rebellion International Solidarity Network that you, Jamie, has and Gail, you've helped us to craft, you know, and is now at the center of developing strategy and tactics locally, nationally, continentally, internationally. I think this is really, really, you know, the pointer to the way forward. And now that we're putting a lot of thoughts and thinking of ways where, as we mount pressure for governments to take the Citizens Assembly seriously in top-down actions, also to develop global citizenship assembly from below, right? So that, and that is in the hands of people across the world, global North, global South people unifying, you know, in an effort to also become the power from below and pressurize, you know, power from the top. I think that we have exciting times, you know, ahead of us, and this is what makes Extinction Rebellion and the movements that we're now galvanizing, particularly from the global south, to engage, you know, in equity with Extinction Rebellion. This is what, you know, offers us the confidence that we will win this fight for humanity and for planet Earth.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Kofi. Zuhura, just to finish off this round of the panel, and then you viewers out there, we're going to do some of your questions. Thank you so much for that, Kofi, by the way. Zuhura, how are we going to grow? It was really interesting talking to you today, and what drew you to Extinction Rebellion was really interesting. I mean, I've been involved in the established climate activist world for a long time as well, and I saw this as being really different. And I also have a lot of friends from the 90s who were involved in the road protest movements who haven't been interested in climate activism at all until Extinction Rebellion came along, and they've been drawn to it. So we've already kind of reaching people who hadn't been reached by climate activism of the past 20 years. But how's it going to continue to grow? You know, remember Johnson got voted in. You know, the majority of people definitely didn't vote with any thought of the climate emergency.
Yeah.
So how's this going to grow? What do you think?
Well, it's the $1 million question, isn't it? There are a couple of things. I think the people who are hopeless and numb to everything have found each other now. And so I lost track of the number of people I've met who've said, oh, I just didn't know what to do. I honestly had lost hope. And then suddenly this gave them hope. And now we know each other and we know who we are. And we may not have a very good database, but we've got each other's contact details and numbers. And we are a community of people. We've got XR doctors and XR scientists. I think those smaller groups will continue in loads of different forms. They might not be called XR scientists, but they will continue in some way. And I think the coronavirus is it's a difficult time because so many, you know, it's affecting so many millions of people in such horrific ways, and you know, hundreds of thousands of deaths. And there's a very strong desire to get safe again and go back to normal, and go back to where we were. And I can understand that. But if we can think about how we can like bring forward instead of retracting backwards, and and I think at this moment of opportunity, this window of opportunity where people have had to literally pause their lives, you do come back with a different mindset and a slightly more like, not necessarily open mindset, because something horrific might have happened to you in your life or your job, or, you know, but something has definitely changed in most people's lives in the last month. And we've got to grab this, and it's a relatively small window. And also the governments around the world are never going to be spending this much money again on re-stimulating the economy. Like this is really once in a century kind of stuff. And so how that money is spent and shifting that, we're just at that kind of point where things are about to land, and then do we go off in this direction or do we go off in this direction? And it requires a very small push in that way at this time. And so I think there's something about making ideas common sense. So for example, like the circular economy. So, you know, obviously we, you know, use resources and then chuck them away, and that's, you know, the linear economy. The circular economy just is probably going to be a key part of a zero carbon world. But instead of calling it this circular economy and trying to explain that to people, just talk about really obvious things that everyone can agree with. It's just like, don't waste stuff, don't repair things. And most people, like across political divides, can get behind that kind of thing. And so I'd love to have XR doing something, and I'm trying to desperately work out at the moment how to do this and what this is, but that makes these ideas that we need for zero carbon feel like ideas that everyone can get behind and everyone can own, and like even like they came up with it themselves, you know, like, oh, well, obviously we should do that. We should make sure that things can be repaired. Like we want everyone to be thinking that, because yes, that is what we want. And so, and then governments will be less likely to subsidize those, you know, those fossil heavy economies, I hope, if those ideas seem like what is like common sense. And I think big part, I mean, lots of ways that we could do that and how, and I'm aware of time. But that's what I would love to see in terms of our growth becoming more, in a way, more mainstream.
Yeah, fantastic. It's the ability to communicate in ways that aren't sort of overcomplicated and frightening people, like, oh, sorry, I don't have a degree in politics, so I don't know what you're saying, you know, but it's amazing when you can communicate stuff in ways that are common sense, where, as you say, people feel like, well, yeah, that's what I already think.
Obviously, obviously you should do that. That's what you want people to be saying.
Well, that's an amazing, important bit of work to do. I'm going to turn over to you brilliant audience out there, and let's have a look at the questions coming in. In fact, I'll tell you what, we're going to open up on the big one. So there's loads of good questions here, but I know that I saw one just now that's about the pandemic, and I think we need to be able to talk about that before we're gone, because, you know, folks, time flies. We're already an hour in. Was it Edward? Yes, here we go. Yes, Susan Bibbings on Facebook. Hi, Susan. Hello, Susan. How to disrupt and make progress in a self-distancing pandemic situation. Okay, so this is, and by the way, thanks everyone. We're getting loads of thumbs up. That's very encouraging for the panel. But yeah, Susan, you've got a really important point there. And I'm going to take another question as well, but we're going to pick up on Susan's one. But also, thank you, Edward Pickering Sims. How can we recapture the huge awakening of love of the first rebellion? Just keep on loving, Edward. That's fantastic. But let's see what else. So we've got the pandemic one, and what would be, okay, now, why do you think it's okay to block roads and inconvenience the public? Okay, well, let's do these two basic ones. I'm gonna start by answering Acer, A-C-E-R on Instagram. Asa, you've asked, why do you think it's okay to block roads and inconvenience the public? I'll start off on answering that one, and then I'm going to throw open both questions to the rest of the panel. So remember, Susan said how to disrupt and make progress in a self-distancing pandemic situation. So really, that's a very, you know, that's on all of our minds at the moment. So Asa, with the Asa or Aka, A-C-E-R, yeah, what we found, right? So we did a lot of media during the April Rebellion, and of course, you know, all the media, there's some network and they all work out, well, how are we going to address these troublemakers? And you end up getting asked the same question all the time. And so one was, you know, how can you justify disrupting people's lives, you know, by blocking roads? The answer is really clear, and we got it from that amazing teenager from Sweden, Greta Thunberg. We are no different to the disruption of a fire alarm going off in the middle of the night in your house tonight that tells you that your house is on fire. That is the disruption that we're causing. We have found that non-violent civil disobedience in a short period of time, we've got a huge message, the most important message in humanity, right across the country. We've become a household name, or more importantly, our message has become a household name. So non-violent civil disobedience works. And yes, it's terrible. Disruption will mean that some people don't get to where they need to get to on time. You know, and there will be situations where people don't get to an airplane that will take them to their mother's funeral, or they won't get to a hospital where somebody is really ill. And that's an absolutely tragic circumstance. And there's no getting away from that. And of course, we really do apologize for those kind of extreme inconveniences. But the fact remains that unless we act like this, we will not have got the platform that we've got. And the platform we've got is vital, because unless we take this as an emergency and treat it as an emergency, then we're in a terrible situation. Everybody's in a terrible situation completely. So that would be my answer to ACERS. But I'd like to open it up. Put your little finger up if anyone wants to start the answers, please, to how do we deal with, you know, we're a non-violent civil disobedience movement in a time of isolation. So how do we get through this? Or how does the pandemic inform the way that Extinction Rebellion is going to carry on in its ways of behaving? Who wants to open up with that? Okay, yeah, Zuhura, then Lauren.
I don't have a complete answer, but I think that I've seen some really clever actions recently, which have been fantastic. So I think that the New York rebels, April Fools, was really good when they pretended that Google had divested from, had stopped funding climate denial organizations, and they hadn't, but they made it look like Google had said that they would, and then it put Google in an awkward position of being like, this is fake news, even though it was good news. And so I think that was kind of clever. I don't know how much it reached people outside of XR, but that kind of thing, if you could take that idea and make that mass, that would be really, really awesome. And then the sort of digital blockades like the Fridays of the Future did on the strike, the last Friday strike, where you just jam fossil fuel companies, telephones, Twitters, all of their social media constantly, all day, you know, and it requires, I mean, it's the same thing as an action. I think it's a really difficult thing because you gain your love for the movement and your desire to want to do it, I think, largely through other people and meeting other people and meeting amazing friends and having all those moments that we kind of reminisced about at the beginning. And so I do think we still have to do in-person stuff, but we are definitely going to have to think of something significantly cleverer than just blocking roads, because we can't. I think October was difficult for a number of reasons, but I call it the difficult second album. Like, you just can't keep doing the same thing over and over again and expect to get, you know, April level responses. So I would say highly targeted actions that people can understand why you're targeting. So like the UK Oil and Gas Authority, for example, would be a kind of, you know, sort of much more targeted, but still mass.
Okay, thank you. Lauren, you were going to also give some suggestions. I mean, there's two questions, you know, should you still be blocking roads, but also what we're looking at here is, you know, to the extent to which the coronavirus pandemic sort of stops us doing the kind of practices that we're used to, and what can we be doing instead?
Yeah, so it's a time for those of us who are lucky enough to not be affected directly with the illness, for regeneration and also reaching out to others in our community, obviously remotely, and building those relationships. I know a lot of people have been volunteering in the community, and I have myself. And, you know, when you're developing this resilience as a community to deal with something like this, it's good practice for the future. And also you'll get to know people who maybe, you know, you can join up with after this is over. To maybe pressure the council into making sure that we're more prepared for crises when they do occur again, because we know that things like this, pandemics, are going to happen more frequently, you know, freak weather events. We need to build community resilience, and we need to build solidarity with one another, and we need to know our neighbours. So all this is really, really important work. You know, stay safe while you're doing it, but find out who's helping, and those will be our allies moving forward.
Yeah, fantastic, Lauren. There's for the sake of everyone out there listening, you know, there's a section or a kind of new prong from Extinction Rebellion that's, I think it's called Not Going Back, and it's along the lines of what Lauren's been talking about here, which is that, you know, the first thing that XR did when it became clear that coronavirus was going to be very serious was we plugged into the mutual aid movement. So there's a huge mutual aid network across the UK. So suddenly there were basically 200,000 extra people willing to work in their communities, not as XR wearing the flag and everything, but just this is when communities come together. And that's now kind of growing into quite a significant movement. And there's lots of people's assemblies, participatory democracy that's been held online. And of course, what's happening is that, you know, you might be, you know, twice a week, you might have to go and walk Mrs. Doyle's dog. Okay, and you know, you're a XR rebel environmentalist, but you're walking Mrs. Doyle's dog with you know, a family who are extremely right wing in their views. Okay, but you know, in the face of a crisis, your differences become quite small compared to your similarities. You know, we've got to come together to face this crisis. So there are, exactly as Lauren's saying, there's an opportunity for allegiances to be built and the networks to grow, and also for us to use our huge network to be really supportive to our communities. And the idea is, of course, that, you know, we can do what Jessica was talking about, which is with the shock doctrine. You know, when this particular pandemic ends and people are able to not be isolated and we return to some sort of life as normal, you know, the idea of not going back, the idea of actually let's force through those changes that are now available to be made, you know, so that's all underneath that sort of phrase of not going back. Would anyone else like to add to this, though? Because it is, I mean, George, I have a feeling that you've got some stuff to say about COVID-19 and how it affects the environmentalist movement. I'd be really grateful if you're able to sort of bring some commentary to this question.
I mean, it has shown us the extraordinary potential for change. So many things that we were told were impossible suddenly can just be done. It's like, you know, I know people who've been activists on homelessness for the whole of their lives. And all the time, regardless of whatever government they were facing, they were told, well, yes, it's a very sad and tragic problem. And yes, we need to do something. And yes, of course, we agree that everybody should be housed, but, you know, the homeless will always be with us. And suddenly, like, oh, right, everyone, all homeless people need to be found places right now. So like, oh, right, so it can be done. And people have been talking about a universal basic income for decades, and it's always been dismissed as a utopian idea. And the idea that it could be introduced in the United States, for instance, was just seen as totally preposterous. Pandemic comes along, oh yeah, well, everyone should have some money from the state. And it just shows, it's such a graphic illustration of the fact that if governments want to change, they can change. And if they get people behind them, and if we, the people, get other people behind us, then anything can shift. All the old certainties, all the things which we were told were set in stone. We were constantly told there is no alternative. In this great era of supposed choice, we were told there is no alternative. There's only one way of doing politics. There's only one way of doing economics. There's only one way of organizing society. So all you with your stupid student dreams, you can bog off because you're just wasting your time. And suddenly we discover, no, there isn't just one way. There's lots of potential different ways of doing it. And what we've seen is not only much more resolute state action than we were told was ever going to be possible in peacetime, but we've also seen much more resolute community action as well than any of us are accustomed to. This incredible stepping forward, the regeneration of the commons, of people getting together and solving the problems which other aspects of the political economy don't solve, whether it's the state or this supposed thing called the market or the household by itself. It's the commons, the coming together of people around our common problems, facing our common predicaments together and being so much stronger and more resilient as a result. And what we've seen, and I don't know whether it's temporary or permanent, but I really hope it's permanent, is certainly for the moment, the total collapse of neoliberalism. You know how they always used to say there were no atheists in the trenches? It's not actually true. Anyone who reads Siegfried Sassoon will know it's not true. But there are no neoliberals in a pandemic.
That's absolutely true. Fantastic. Well, God, anyone watching this, you might get a little slither of hope watching this. It's quite exciting. Kofi, can you take us to an area that I think really resonates with what we're bringing up here, which is, Tina, there is no alternative, as George is talking about. That has been hammered through to us since the Thatcher days, right? And, we are continually being confronted with, yes, there are lots of alternatives and they're right in front of our eyes, okay? And of course, what we've had in our third demand the whole time is we're not offering solutions, okay? And we're definitely not saying vote for this or vote for that. What we're saying is the current system is not capable of matching the needs of this crisis. And we trust the people, fully informed, chosen at random in a citizens' assembly. We trust ordinary people coming together to be more reliable on bringing the solutions that we need to kind of have a possible fair and distant future for the next 7 generations. And of course, when you take that to the highest level possible, which is a global citizens' assembly. So if you're talking about a genuine global citizens' assembly that's genuinely a reflection of the human family, we're looking at it being 2,000 people. Look at the photograph, ladies and gentlemen. 1,000 of those 2,000 are women. 230 of them are white, okay? Look at the breakdown of the human family, and that being your decision-making body for a decent future where those people get a full 360-degree understanding of the issues, and we trust them more. So it's an extraordinary opportunity. And I'd like you to speak to that a bit, Kofi, because, working with International Solidarity Network, one of the first things you realize is, the white Western European mindset is just one mindset. And there are so many different ways of us moving forward as a human family. So I'd like you to speak to that a bit for the sake of all the wonderful audience listening to this.
Well, that is also one of the, great opportunities Extinction Rebellion is catalyzing in terms of, again, not coming like it got the answers, but coming as this catalyst of saying we all can bring ideas, our learning, our different cultures, our diverse perspectives on life, our various experiences in different parts of the world, and through deliberation with each other, reasoning, dialogue, we will work out solutions from our own experiences, but also face the new challenges that confront us. And And this is where, even in terms of the COVID-19 situation, you know, Extinction Rebellion actually, in terms of what it's been trying to do in terms of disrupts business as usual. And we've seen this pandemic just compel this disruption that many people felt that, you know, was impossible, was not even desirable, right? You know, but we see that. And Extinction Rebellion preceded this, just in time of saying, yes, we must disrupt business as usual. But also because in that disruption, we create, you know, we learn from each other, we pause everything that has been seen as business as usual and begin to think through the real challenges, what really matters. And that as one human family, beginning to respect each other's perspectives, each other's experiences, each other's cultures, each other's ways of knowing and working things out, and not wanting to impose one particular monocultural view of things, one hegemonistic way of looking at things, whether in the old political paradigms of left, right, center, whatever you look at it. But let's give each other as one human family the opportunity to learn from each other, to sit down and not just rush through things. Let's bring all the issues together. Let's bring all our knowledges together. Let's bring all the science, all the culture, all the spiritualities, you know, all the ethics together. And let's, in that learning, work out the answers together. And that challenges where we think we've come in terms of even democracy, in terms of where our civilization has come up. And that is the opening that the citizens' assemblies at local, national, continental, global levels now offers us. That we can learn from all these deliberative, you know, practices of governance from time immemorial, from all cultures, from all across the world, bring all of this together and now confront the challenges of our time. And we then can see very clearly, as through the work that we as the XRISN are doing with our partner networks in the Global South, you know, with XRAN in Africa, with XRAN in Asia, with XRISE in South of the Yala or South America, you know, we're working through this and bringing people together to say your traditional deliberative processes of governance are relevant at this time. They are as equal to any other human experience of trying to reason through problems and find answers. But this is the opportunity now we all can come together as one human family, bypass these systems that are not working for us, whether in the global north or the global south. You know, these ways of governance are no longer working for the human family. They're not working for the planet. But by putting our experiences and learning together and the resolve to break through, you know, with our own power, we can find the answers together, answers that we work out, owned by all of us, not imposed from one particular culture or the other, but work out by all of us. And in that, and I don't know, Gail put it so beautifully, we rediscover this human family and the commons that belong to all of us. Commons not just in terms of land, but commons in terms of knowledge. That knowledges we all bring together, cultures we all bring together, spiritualities, ways of living that we all bring together. And honestly, even in this pandemic, we can see through that future, which we now, our generations, have the real possibility of answering the cries of many generations before, but also the knowledges and experiences of many now brought to bear on opening new chapters, not just for humanity alone, but for the entire planet, for all life forms. And what a most beautiful moment for all of us to be alive.
Thank you so much, Kofi. It's for those of you who were in Bristol when we just before the Spring Uprising, we had a festival in Bristol, didn't we? And there was an amazing panel for the Internationalist Solidarity Network. and Kofi was there, Esther was there, Farhana Yamin. It was an amazing panel. But right near the end, and we started talking about remembering family, as Kofi has just been, you know, and there is this mindset that we're very much stuck in, you know, and due to the power of the panel, we did start remembering family, that we are all one family. And Gail, who was chairing that talk, she turned to the audience and suddenly said, turn to the person next to you and just talk about remembering family. And half the people there turned to the person next to them and started sobbing. That was the power of that panel. The power of that panel was reminding us that we are one global family together. And I think a lot of the power of what's happening here is that great saying, you know, dare to dream the impossible, dare to demand the impossible. And because the situation we're in at the moment, you know, if you said 4 months ago, all flights will be cancelled and consumerism's dead, you know, people, what you're talking about. But of course, the impossible is we can demand the impossible. And that's what's on offer to us. And the experience of global citizen assemblies, it can be historical without a doubt. And it's the idea of learning, as Kofi said earlier. We are very, very ready to learn. And it's a very different movement to one that says, hey, follow us, we have all the answers. And that's great. That humility is so profoundly important. Jessica, come on in.
Thank you, Kofi. I found that really, really moving. And also in the context of, for as long as I've been involved in Extinction Rebellion, I've been feeling that we're in a very unlucky time because we have Putin, we have Trump, we have people who don't look like at an international level they will get together and have the wherewithal to sort this out. So the idea of the power coming from the roots up, that seems to be the only way that we can move this forward, with people forcing the mass of people, forcing everybody else to listen. And that vision was really powerful. Thank you. I found it very moving, as I said. So I just have an addenda to what Kofi said, really, rather than my own idea.
No, thanks. I'm going to go to the magic audience out there because we're running out of time, which is incredible. I told you it would fly by. This is quite an important question here. And thank you so much. I'm so sorry to everyone out there who we haven't been able to answer all the questions. Zoe Cohen, Kenny Mann, Anne Cross, Hazmataz, Liz Gould. We can't answer all of them, but there's a really interesting one here from Haz. How do we, oh no, not that one. Sorry, where are we? Yes. Due to government inaction on the COVID crisis, do you think more Joe Public will join XR as they may now identify with how inadequate the government really is? So that's from Kenny Mann on YouTube. Thanks for that, Kenny. So due to the government inaction on the COVID crisis, do you think more Joe Public will want to join XR as they may now identify how inadequate the government really is? It's an interesting question. Would anyone like to take that?
I could. I've got an opinion.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if you look at opinion polls, the government are doing incredibly well. There's a real rally around the flag kind of feeling. And I think that it's a very limited filter bubble of people who think the government isn't doing well. And so I'm hesitant to say, yeah, we're going to realise and that's going to be a reason for people to join XR. I mean, and also I see how many people join XR in Oxford on our Facebook thing because I'm an admin, and it's not high. You know, I feel like attention right now is on COVID, and that's completely understandable. So I've got quite a negative answer to that, which is no. I think people are actually, like, vast numbers of people think that the government are doing very well, and I think it's really important to maintain our perspective that we do live in a bit of a bubble, XR one. And most people actually think, you know, polling suggests that people think it's doing really well.
No, don't be sorry. I think that's a very realistic answer, Zuhura. It leads me to ask something I've actually been dying to ask you, George. You have a fantastic colleague at The Guardian, Carol Cadwallader. And the work that she did that won her the Orwell Prize, I'm not convinced that it's actually filtered down to the mass public at all, what she revealed. But with the Cambridge Analytica style technology, we're talking about propaganda weaponized to such a vast degree that it arrives at you as entertainment. You don't even know that it's propaganda. It's absolutely terrifying. The whistleblower, Chris Wiley from Cambridge Analytica, he said, the The technology we've got now, it knows you better than you know yourself. So you are having your mind bent out of shape. You don't even know it's happening. This is terrifying. If that's the extent of the power that the dark money can operate at the moment, then what chance have we got, George, and what can we do about it?
We are up against it. There's no question that the power of money is as great or greater than it's ever been in politics. And this is the fundamental question. And because it's a fundamental question, it's the one you scarcely ever see discussed in the media. You know, the BBC represents politics as if it were a matter of preferences rather than a matter of interests. But politics is the visible manifestation of interests. When you see a government saying we're committing to austerity, we're cutting taxes, we're cutting regulations, not doing that because it thinks, oh, wouldn't it be nice to cut regulations, cut this red tape, you know, the sort of regulations which would have stopped the Grenfell Tower, the sort of regulations which would have ensued we had a proper pandemic response, for example. But it's not saying those, it's not cutting those regulations because it just thinks it'd be a nice idea to do. It's because it's been lobbied by very, very rich people, by billionaires and by corporations and by the network of think tanks that they've created based around one street in one address, actually, in London. This whole range of these extreme neoliberal think tanks, which are really just lobby organizations for undisclosed donors. It's being lobbied, it's being pressed to do that stuff against the democratic interests of the people. And then when you add in the ways in which we can now be manipulated through social media, through Facebook, which was what Cambridge Analytica primarily used, through WhatsApp, as we saw in the Brazilian election, through various platforms used around the world to tremendous effect, to spread lies, to distract people, to dissuade people from voting, as has happened in some countries very effectively, to sort of reduce the size of the electorate in order to ensure that a right-wing party will win, because that's what tends to happen when electorates reduced in size. Again and again, we see the money of the billionaires and the big corporations translated directly into political power by means of dissuading and gulling and persuading us through all sorts of covert exercises of which we're not aware. And Carol, she to reveal the tip of the iceberg there. She showed a little bit of what she was able to discover. And other people have shown a little bit more, but we suspect there's huge a range of stuff which we simply are not aware of yet, which is manipulating democracy and basically making democracy a dead letter. So we have to find other means of reaching people. We have to be able to ignite global movements which are more effective, which are bigger than those dark and devious means of throwing elections. And that's a huge challenge, and it's one that we're going to have to keep on talking about how we best counter that. I think, you know, XR and Fridays for Future have been really, really brilliant at bringing forward issues which have been deliberately blotted out of the media by lobbying power, by the fact that most of the media is owned by billionaires, that those are parts of the media which aren't, particularly the public service, well, particularly the BBC, seem very happy to go along with the billionaires' agenda. You know, it's been amazing the way in which XR and Fridays for Future are being able to cut through that and still get the issues to the front of people's minds. Well, we're just going to have to be very clever and very fleet of foot in deciding how we're going to carry on doing that.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much. Folks, we've got 6 minutes left. It's been an absolute pleasure doing this. And I am so grateful to all the panel. Thank you to all the people who've sent in the questions and done your little thumbs up and hearts. It means ever such a lot to us. I'm just going to do a round with each of you, just speaking for a minute, saying why you want the audience to go out there and get more people to come on board with Extinction Rebellion, why you think that's such an important thing for us to do. Okay, you only have a minute each. I'm going to start by saying something completely different. I just want to remind everybody about a beautiful moment on April the 21st. So that was a week into the April Rebellion. The great Polly Higgins passed away, and she was in the hospital as she was passing away, and she could see us. She could see us honouring her, and she could see Waterloo Bridge and the amazing thing that we did in Waterloo Bridge. And it was an amazing thing for her to have seen the accumulation of all her work. And I just wanted to honour her in my last minute. And now I'm going to just chuck it out. I'm sorry, because it's not an easy thing to encapsulate something in a minute, but I'm going to start with you, Lauren, because you're the youngest, and I find what you did on the BBC was just so exciting. I wonder if you could just give us a minute to the audience about what you think would be most important to use to bring people to come on board with Extinction Rebellion.
Yeah, so I think it's showing people that the transformative changes needed to get to net zero carbon can really, really enrich people's lives. So, you know, through the crisis, you really start to see what's important. So people doing essential work now are the people who are generally not valued very much in society. You know, they've had a pay freeze for the past 10 years. And, you know, people going to work in, you know, supermarkets aren't paid for the risks that they're undertaking now and the risks that they undertake day to day. So going forward, I think we've got a chance to recalibrate society and to really start thinking, you know, who do we value in this society? We've got a choice. I've seen on the news that, you know, they're wanting us to get back to work to keep the economy going. And that to me says that the government, rather than having us at home thinking about all these ideas, you know, it's safer for them to continue with business as usual, even though that's killing us. You know, we can either, sorry, it's very difficult to do that in a minute. Yeah, so the government at the moment is telling us that rather than share and wait out the virus until, you know, there's hope of a vaccine, you know, they'd rather us go back to work and they'd rather us keep churning that machine forward. And, you know, that's really terrifying, and it just shows the types of people who are in charge at the moment and, you know, where their interests lie. So if anything, we need to go out and we need to show people that there is a way forward that is positive, and it's not wishy-washy to think that, it's not utopian thinking, it's realistic. We cannot continue as normal.
Fantastic. That's it. Brilliant. That's brilliant. It is really difficult to do in a minute, but that's a cracker. And thank you so much for all your input on this panel today. Zuhura Plummer, take it away.
Why get involved? I feel like I've said so many times that the next 6 months are the most important in our history in the next year, but really the coronavirus has made this next 6 months such a phenomenal time. Like, we could really actually change things now, and we have to rise out of this like terrible epidemic and show like a positive vision. And we've got more time now till it's COP26, and so we have to, like, this is a very limited amount of time in which we can act. This window is not going to last for very long, and to grab people at that moment when they are like just kind of emerging, blinking from lockdown into the sunlight again, and inspire them with nature and inspire them with community and inspire them with all the things that they have, you know, the positive things that have come out of this, and show that, you know, it's a glimpse of like another world being possible. And we have to just make it a little bit more than just a glimpse in the distance, and just bring it a little bit closer so that people can actually focus on it.
Great. Thank you. That's great. Thank you very much, Zuhura. Kofi, can you give us just a minute on why people should be bringing everybody on board with Extinction Rebellion, mate?
Well, I think that, you see, again, I mean, there's so many beautiful things about Extinction Rebellion, and it is not to say that it doesn't have internal challenges and external, you know, threats, you know, now even those are mounting much more, but there is a growing power within and outside of Extinction Rebellion to be able now, even in terms of its own strategic approach, to say, you do not need to come to us as Extinction Rebellion. Come as who you are. Come as the movements that you are. And let's work together in equity, because we can build the power together, being a diversity of movements, and centering on empowering ourselves through these processes that from the grassroots grow into the global citizens assemblies, we are the power to make this change happen. And for me, it is an incredible strength of Extinction Rebellion to find humility in itself, because also of the quality of people and good number of people in the who are playing leading roles at various levels of the movement, that we can find our strength to say, this is the time for all communities to come with all their movements, all their networks, and having common cause in our own power from below through leading to these global citizen assemblies. We then can be the change. And I think no matter how people dance around with the misinformation and the miseducation, humanity is coming together, answering the call of Mother Earth, responding to the examples set by all our ancestors, of the past, the long ago past, and the recent ones like Polygeians you've mentioned, incredibly also, when you have the Adivasis, in places like India, and those who are in prison as their advocates, their message, like that of Professor Shoma said, breaking through the prison walls to inspire many, many, many communities across the global south, across the world to rally. I think we are at this point in time when nothing is going to stop all of us rediscovering our human family and pulling Mother Earth back from the precipice, ending that, rescuing ourselves. The power to do the impossible now is unfolding. We are learning that again. And it is that commitment to doing the impossible by ourselves that is what is going to deliver victory to all of us. We are all in this together because we are rediscovering the power of our global human family, and that we can do the impossible and make planet Earth answer our call to pull us all back from the premises. I'm very confident that with Extinction Rebellion seeing its role now more of a catalyst of a movement of movements, a movement of movements that delivers a global citizens assembly of unifying all our powers together, we are opening wonderful new chapters in history.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Kofi. That's Kofi Klu from the International Solidarity Network, delivering a fantastic speech of hope. Thank you so much. Jessica Townsend, what's your minute about why people should come on board with Extinction Rebellion?
That is an amazing global view, but I also think that local is really, really important. And what COVID has made us do is go back into our communities, into our homes. I feel nature in the morning reaching through my window with birdsong that I never could hear before. I used to hear planes going over first thing. I live in the east of London, and I would think, oh my God, is somebody being deported? That would be my first thought on waking up. And now I hear blimmin' birds. And I also, because I have a health condition, my neighbors buy my food for me. And I know people, some lovely key worker from down the road brings me oat milk after her shift, so that I can have something on my cereal. So I think that one of the impossible things we need to do is what we Londoners never used to do, which is talk to our flipping neighbours, share food with them, help them out, have like a street party. And let's face it, global capitalism freaking sucks. People walking towards a tube, but looking at their phones, not looking at the human beings around them, because they're already doing the work that we're all in I remember George writing about isolation in very beautiful terms. Capitalism isolates us in our own little boxes with our washing machine, our computer, all of which are programmed to die on us so that we have to buy another version in 2 or 3 years. One of the things France has done is has outlawed that. That is a fantastic move forward that we should think of ourselves. So yes, and one more thing, messaging is what Cambridge Analytica and those people do. Let us, as Extinction Rebellion, not get too hung up on messages. We are going to grow this movement one human being by another human being. Reach out to the people in your neighborhoods and see if we can grow that way.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jessica Townsend, so much. Thank you, everyone on the panel. I'm going to finish with a thank you to Mary on Facebook. Says, thank you, George, Kofi, Zuhura, Jessica and Lauren. And thank you, Jamie and Extinction Rebellion, for yet again bringing us together and giving us a wider, bolder, collective vision, as well as hope, and for keeping the conversation going so that together we can move forwards as one world for our world, our collective home. Thank you very much, Mary. And on this last note, ladies and gentlemen, I shall give you an image which I'd like to carry home with you and dwell on. We are an extraordinary species. In fact, we are exquisite. And in my opinion, we haven't even started yet. We are capable of extraordinary things. And so far, we have just simply been sitting in front of a violin and banging on it with a spoon. We haven't even picked it up and played it yet, ladies and gentlemen. So thank you so much, everybody. Thank you all the people who put in all the comments and the wavy hands. Thanks for the techie team that put this together. Please keep it lit, ladies and gentlemen.